Thank you so much, my president.
Hello, can you all hear me okay? I was just wondering if the audio on your end was working because through Zoom I can't hear anything that's being said in the meeting. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to let you all know that we can hear this audio on Zoom, but besides that, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you all now. I can hear you.
Wonderful, thank
Great.
you. Well, first of all, thank you for saying something because I've been talking for a while. So we're gonna have to restart. So I appreciate that you raised your hand and you raised it at the right moment for public comment, which was ironic. So thank you again. Okay, so we're gonna restart. Dr. Hurst, would you mind? First of all, everyone who's watching, welcome to our governance committee meeting. Dr. Hurst, could you please take roll call?
Absolutely. President Smith Rhodes,
Good afternoon, everyone. Present.
Clerk Gonzalez Floyd,
Good evening, President.
and then myself, I'm here.
Thank you. Also with us, we have Genesis Munoz, who supports our committee. We are now going to move to the land and labor and body acknowledgement. For the land acknowledgement, we recognize that we are presently on the lands of the Chochenyo, Muwekma, Kark, and Ohlone peoples and acknowledge them as the first inhabitants of the land we currently occupy. President Smith-Folds, would you mind doing the labor and body recognition?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I acknowledge that the burden of environmental exploitation and systemic injustice falls upon the labor of Black and brown bodies in the building of this country and its institutions. I remember that Black and brown people were born and died working this land against their will for generations. Also acknowledge the continued contribution of the labor of survivors over the centuries to today, of all immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented peoples in the building of what we refer to as the United States.
Thank you so much, President Smith-Folds. Now we're going to move to our purpose and outcomes of the committee. The purpose of the governance committee is to review policy resolutions or regulations. And once we have done work with whatever comes forward, we present it to the full board for review and adoption. As of this moment, we have about 16 or 17 items that have been sent to us either by board members, community, or staff to review or look into further if we don't have a policy. So because we have quite a few, we're gonna try to work as quickly as we can throughout the next year. We are gonna have one meeting a month, including in June, but not in July. Today we have 3 items. We are discussing the WCCUSD Board of Education Governance Handbook, specifically one section that needs to be reviewed. We're also discussing a draft from staff of anti-racism board policy and the administrative regulation. And then third, we are going to be having a discussion about a possible new board policy that came from President Smith-Folds and I to pay student trustees for their time or also give them elective course credit. So we're going to be looking at a few examples in the state before we draft something. Okay, so now we're going to move to public comment. The public gets 2 minutes for public comment in this section. It can be about anything on our agenda or not on an agenda. We're also going to provide public comment opportunities after each discussion item. Do we have any public comment? If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand and you'll be recognized.
Our first public comment is Healthy Contra Costa. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joanna Gurdian, and I'm here representing Healthy Contra Costa or Healthy Richmond. And the only question I have for this governance committee is if you know, I know you said you had about 16 or 17 different policies that you'll be reviewing. But the only question I have for you all is if you had an estimate of when you think the race equity community oversight policy will come to this committee. Besides that, I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. We will discuss it and get back to you if it's okay. It is on the docket, but we have not had discussion, an updated discussion on when that will come back. So we will definitely follow up with you. Thank you so much. Do
That
we have?
concludes public comment.
Thank you so much, thank you so much, Ms. Munoz. Okay, so now we're gonna move to our discussion items. We are going to go to our first discussion item, which is the governance handbook. And for the governance handbook, we are going to be reviewing one specific section. And all the items are attached, so for anyone who watches from home, we are going to be looking at
You want me to share my screen?
yeah, if you don't mind, I think it's page 11. Hmm. No, it's not 11, sorry.
We're referring to the ethics section, sorry.
Yes, do you remember where that is?
Let's see. That would-
Thank you.
Access to this document is on the agenda.
Yes, on the
Yes.
agenda. President Smith, do you remember where
When we were talking about
at our board meeting?
ethics,
Yes.
let me.
The public, we apologize. I had it.
You have access to this document on the agenda, it's okay. Let me see. Maybe.
Okay, I think it's page 38.
Sorry, committee chair, I had it with them.
It's okay. Yes, it's, we found it at the same time. 38 and 39.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the formal complaint process. The discussion at the board meeting, why it was sent back here, was that we wanted to ensure it followed the current process that the president was envisioning. What is written is what legal counsel has recommended, and what was followed during my presidency when there was conflict on the board, and specifically when there were complaints from the public or from staff towards a board member. So this describes that process. So practically, if there's a written complaint, it goes about a board member, it either goes to staff or it goes to the board president. The board president then assesses the validity
Mhm.
of the complaint. And then if the president deems it to be legitimate, then the process which the president should follow is below. If the complaint's against the president, it goes to the clerk of the board to follow the same process. If it's a complaint between members of the board, we would follow what's on C, which is mediation. And then the mediator is chosen by the superintendent from a list that they bring forward to the board members affected. Now, when it's escalated to a board ethics committee, is because either the nature of the complaint has led to an investigation, or if the mediation fails between the mediator that the superintendent brings forward, to resolve the issue between the board members. So I'm gonna read this section because this is a section that we had this agreement on the board. So if mediation fails, or if the complaint is of severe nature, it will be referred to a board ethics committee composed of at least 2 board members not involved in the complaint. The committee will conduct a thorough investigation, gather evidence, and hear testimony from all parties involved. The ethics committee will be appointed by the board president unless the complaint is against the board president, in which case the clerk will appoint the committee. Then it follows to talk about the resolution and the action. Based on results of the mediation, appropriate action will be recommended. These actions may include counseling, training, public acknowledgement of misconduct, censure, or other disciplinary measures as deemed appropriate. The entire board will vote on the recommended actions. So that was really the 2 sections that we had a discussion about. Now, what I recall from trustees' comments, they were worried that this was a slippery slope, and that it could lead to not just an increased number of complaints against board members, but that it would also lead to an increased cost on the district, especially if we have to do investigations by a third party every time. So why don't we open it up for public comment first, if there's any. And then after that, let's open it up for the 3 of us to have a discussion. Dr. Hurst, do you see any hands up?
No, sir, there's no public comment.
Perfect. Okay, so either of you would like to start the discussion?
I think that we have to hold each other accountable. I think that it has to be in the governance handbook. I think that we cannot wait until something happens to have policy on how we handle when something happens, because then all kind of biases could come into play. Then it was like, oh, you're only doing this because it involves me or it involves this. The creation of the governance handbook is to be able to hold those internal controls and external accountability. It's in the book. It's written down. I think that if we believe that this is going to lead to higher litigation or more problems, then don't do nothing wrong. It's only gonna lead there if you go outside of what you know to be the way we are supposed to govern. If you stay within those lanes, we should not get any more, we shouldn't have to even go to this part of the book. If every board member does what they are called to do and elected to do, which is stay within those guides. And we are trained. We have governance training when we first get on the board. We are trained, we have continual training with our superintendent. We have opportunities to be trained by CBSA that can come and talk to the board. We cannot say that, well, people are just going to do X, Y, and Z. That's fine. That runs a very low level course. If someone makes a complaint and it is unfounded, it stops there. But if someone makes a complaint and there's a footing in it, then we have to do our due diligence. That's just part of the job. So I'm complete. I think that this has to be in the governance handbook, and I appreciate the way that it came back to us, but also want us to move this forward. I'm complete.
Thank you. Dr. Hurst, do you have any thoughts?
I think it absolutely needs to be in the governance handbook. We've already had literally one example where we had to refer to a committee. And actually that was in collaboration with legal counsel as well.
Right.
So there's incidences where it has been useful for us to have a board ethics committee. I think it's appropriate also to have steps in place. When I look at this, everything is reasonable. It's been vetted by our legal counsel as well. Just thinking about the conversation, I just would say one of the things that we need to think about, I think that trustee Reckler or trustee Phillips brought up, if in fact, what if we have a situation where we have a few members involved in an issue, who does it go to then and who makes the decision? So I'm not sure how we would handle that and if we resolve that conversation.
I think we call a lawyer. That's what we pay
I
him
think
for.
that's what you said as well, sir, that we
Right.
would get legal counsel involved.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you both. I do think that has to be there because I think the danger of not having it, it also always just will come down to whoever is sitting in the position of board president.
Yep.
And I think that also is slippery slope because what if you have a board president who does not like a certain individual
Yeah.
and then they make him go through investigations or simply give them, you know, what they believe to be the punishment, right, that they deserve or whatever. I think that this allows for consistency, which I think it's important no matter who sits in the positions, right? I think that after hearing you both and hearing some of the comments from the rest of the board, maybe we do want to add like a little bit more in letter D, just around like maybe an example would be the committee will conduct, if you all look at the second sentence, the committee will conduct a thorough investigation. Oh, yeah,
We're
you
on
can,
D, correct?
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
You see it?
can you see it? No, on the screen, it's looking like you're still on,
That's so interesting.
Do I need to refresh? Could it be?
Well,
me?
'cause I'm on D.
can you scroll down, see if it moves, or is
What
it
about
frozen?
that?
No, it's
Is
frozen,
it frozen?
yeah.
Cause you're moving though.
Can you maybe unshare and
Let
reshare?
me do that.
Oh, why am I looking at your screen? I have it too.
What about that?
We're
No,
still in
on.
two.
It's still
Okay,
on.
let me try. Again, here.
All right, now you can see it. Yep.
There we go. Okay, so what I'm thinking is in the second sentence where it says the committee will conduct a thorough investigation, gather evidence, and hear testimonies from all parties involved. I think that maybe there we write, the committee will conduct a thorough investigation if needed and or may refer the investigation to a third-party investigator, Title IX office, or another party that they deem necessary in as part of the process. Something like that to make it clear of like who could it be involved. It doesn't have to go to a third party investigation every
Right.
time,
Right.
especially if it's something small, right?
It
Like,
could be handled internally.
yeah, that is also pretty straightforward, right? But if there's like something that just seems like the board owners won't be able to handle themselves, and they can just refer it to an investigator, right? Or legal counsel. I also think that we need to write somewhere exactly what Dr. Hurst said, in collaboration with legal counsel. So maybe right there, the committee in collaboration with legal counsel will conduct a thorough investigation. And then it can lead to that language. Thoughts?
Go ahead, sir.
I do like that. I was gonna also ask about the last sentence in the, where it says, the ethics committee will be appointed by the board president unless the complaint is against the board president, in which case the clerk will appoint the committee. It probably won't happen like
Right.
this, but what if it's the president and the clerk, then would it be legal counsel that we get involved, or would it
I think
be,
that you would
That's
ask
a good
legal
question.
counsel, who's the
Hmm.
next person
who's the next
that
person?
needs to, that
Mhm.
can make this appointment? Is it the superintendent? Is it the entire board? Is it
Mhm.
the board without the two people involved? Or, but legal counsel should be able to tell us that. So I think that having language like all resources that are readily available or all resources that are deemed necessary, like, because at the end of the day, we're going to follow the advice of legal counsel. and stay within the law. That's just what we have to do. So that would be my opinion on that,
Mhm.
because if something is not handled by board leadership, then the next step is legal counsel. If board leadership is involved and cannot do it, the first step is legal counsel. That would be my point.
Mhm.
No, but it's a really good question. I mean, like, it goes to your other question about like, what happens if it's 3 board members?
Yes.
Or what happens if it's the full board? Honestly, no, I have no idea, and I think that that is really difficult to answer, because I don't even think legal counsel would know,
Mhm.
because like, who else do you have left, right? And it's not like even our lawyers could
Mhm.
tell the board, like, you have to do this, right? They can recommend something, so I think that ultimately it's gonna have to be taken case by case, right, and decided as it goes. There
Mhm.
has to be a little bit of space for vagueness, simply because every situation is different, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's why we have a California School Board Association. That's why we
Mhm.
have other people in place to say,
Mhm.
okay, your whole board has to be dismantled. Or this is what we've seen. There was the people a couple of years ago that most of the board was caught on a hot mic, and then they had to have a emergency election or whatever it is. I think that if we get into the weeds,
Mhm.
then we could think of all kind of scenarios that may happen. But I think the reality of it is we have to look to those resources that are made available to us, our lawyers, the California School Board Association, county, the state, the whatever, they have to have those answers for us.
Mhm.
They should have those answers for us.
Okay, I did write this. May I share my screen for just 1 second? Would you mind allowing me to share?
Yes.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Thank you. Okay, wanna make sure that you'll see my right,
Yep.
the document, okay, I have my Amazon shopping list somewhere else, so I wrote, sorry, I should change the color. Okay, I'm gonna highlight the changes. And then you all tell me. I'll read them in a minute. Okay, those are the 3 areas of changes. So, the committee, in collaboration with legal counsel, that's the 1 change, will conduct a thorough investigation, gather evidence, and hear testimony from all parties involved. This 2nd change, the ethics committee may also request a 3rd-party investigator, the Title IX office, or legal counsel support in the process. And then the 3rd change, if the complaint or mediation includes the board president and clerk, or majority of the board, CSBA and legal counsel, or legal counsel will be contacted for advice.
I think that's as specific as we are going to be able to get.
Yeah.
Did I see your hand? No, I think that's where we have to leave it. I don't think we can get any more specific than that,
Mhm.
because then we'll get caught up in the
Okay.
language, and then we'll
Okay.
get caught up in minutia, so I think that's good.
I agree.
I
You
agree,
agree?
so.
Okay, well, great. Well, then, I'm gonna save this, send it to you, and
Thank you.
then we'll put it for action for our next meeting.
Yes.
Wonderful. And then we'll send it to the full board for action.
For the 15th, sir.
To the full board on the 15th,
No, we need to take action in the committee.
here.
Okay,
Yeah,
here.
what I'm a little unclear about committee is whether or not we can send something from discussion direct to the full board. Or we need to put it also as an action and then send it,
I don't know, because if it's an action item, who gets a vote? You and I?
just us.
So what happens if one votes yes, one vote no?
The chair
It gets the final
gets
say.
the final say, but it is told to the full board, there was a disagreement by the board
Yeah,
members.
Okay, so like we did in the budget.
Yes,
Okay.
the chair decided to move it forward, but there was disagreement by the co-chair.
Where would we find the answer to if we have to send it, if we have to bring it back for action?
Well, this is what I suggest.
Mhm.
I suggest that we agree that we are okay with the changes.
Yeah.
And then we can contact legal counsel and ask them about the process. If they say, no, you need to bring it back for an action within committee, we'll do that for the next meeting. And if not, we'll bring it to the full board
On the
for,
15th.
for a future board meeting, yeah. Is
Okay,
that
So-
okay with you both?
Yes, and I like the fact that if we make a change here, that it goes to the board as soon as possible.
mhm,
So as soon as we make a change here, it goes for action or discussion, whichever step we're at
Right,
that point to the full board. So that way we can,
mhm,
because we have so many, that
right,
we don't get them stacked up.
right,
We, as soon as it happens here, it goes there.
I agree. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you both.
mhm.
Okay, let's move to our next item on the agenda, the draft of the anti-racism board policy and administrative regulation. Dr. Hurst, can I pass to you for introduction?
Absolutely. So per our conversation at a previous board meeting, we approved, or the board approved, the anti-racism statement. There was discussion about bringing a policy back. I did work hand in hand with legal counsel on the policy. They actually liked the statement itself.
This is the
And-
statement, correct? This is the one
Yes.
that we passed without change.
Yeah, so this is the policy that we're bringing to this committee right now.
Okay, have there been any changes?
There has.
Okay,
There's been minor changes
okay,
to align with other board policies that
Mm.
we have in place. So for instance,
Would you mind sharing your screen,
Yeah.
Dr. Hurst?
absolutely.
I'm gonna pull up the original one just for me to look at for reference.
Mm.
So when you look at this, one of the changes he recommended was we had WCC USD. He changed all of those to governing board to be consistent with
Mm,
the language in all of our other policies.
Okay.
And I'm just stop sharing screen for a second so I can share with you the other changes, which were very minor.
Mm.
That he had.
Okay, so in the one that we adopted, it said the West Contra Costa School District Board of Education, and he's saying the governing board.
He's in the
Okay.
governing board.
Okay.
So I'm just getting his notes
Mhm.
together.
Okay. So in the first paragraph, Dr. Hurst, it looks like he did take out WCC USD out of all of it and put the district
mm,
in all of it, but I can't find any other changes in wording. That's the only changes that I see in wording. Everything else looks like it stayed
Yeah,
the
they were
same.
very minor.
got it.
I'm reading this email right now.
Okay,
Okay, so it looks like it's just that
Mhm.
maybe there was like a couple edits on
Yeah.
language, okay. Well, why don't we open it up to public comment first, see if there's anything? Oh, perfect. We do have public comment in person.
Okay, let me set your timer, sir, just 1 second. Okay, ready when you are.
I just have one question. You have the phrase governing board, and then later on you're using the board, and then you're going back to governing board. Are these one and the same entities?
Board
That's a
and
good
governing
question.
board,
Yes.
they are the same.
Okay.
Mhm.
Proper literary practices to put governing board and then parentheses put board, and
Hmm,
then use board going forward.
Hmm.
Thank you. I complete.
Thank you. That is a great suggestion. Do we have any? Doesn't look like we have any hands on Zoom, so, well, let's have a discussion, but I think that that was a great suggestion. Are we okay with adding
I'm
that
okay
suggestion?
with that.
You
Yes,
okay with that?
yes.
Okay, let's do that. And then, okay, pass it on to you. Do you have any comments?
So I'm just trying to. I don't know if it's called redlining. I forgot what it's called, where you take the original document and look at the one
Mhm.
that you're looking at right now. And I'm just trying to make sure that the language that we adopted and the attention behind the language that we adopted is not muddled or decreased in the changes. So I would yield my time for just a minute, just to finish
Mhm.
going through this part of it.
Well, I don't have any comments. I will just wait for you because, I'm okay with the changes and how it was created. I do like all the references that were added,
Mhm.
which are good.
I do have this email I'm looking at. I'm not sure if you want to share screen on me. So,
Can you tell me the changes that he made? By
yes,
looking at
so
it,
he
because it may
says,
be easier for me.
on the
that way.
wording, he may suggest the edits and example, referring to district instead of WCC USD, and being consistent about stating the board rather than we. So removing the term we and putting the board. He said we otherwise left the proposed language
Okay,
from the statement intact from what you
Oh,
sent
okay.
us.
okay.
Okay,
Mhm.
so the intention should be the same.
Yeah.
So if he left the language intact,
Mhm.
and we are now just taking our suggestion from the public, which I agree with. And we are, only substantive change he made was taking WCC USD out and inserting the governing board or board,
Yes.
then I'm okay.
Okay, I'm okay with it too, with this small change of the parentheses of board for the first paragraph. So I guess this will be another example of like, if Lucan says we can move it straight to the board meeting, then we can take it to the rest of the board for action.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'll bring it to action for the next meeting here.
Okay. And I'll
Okay.
check with the council.
Awesome. Okay, and you're okay with it then?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Wow, well, we're moving forward really fast. Did you have another comment?
Am I allowed to have another comment?
Well, sure.
Going to step on protocol. My question is, the word practices, does that include the internal controls to ensure compliance with the policy? In other
Mm,
words, are there controls, is that an aspect of what's meant by the practices?
mm.
You
That's
see
a good question.
practices, let's see. Can you reference what paragraph you're looking at?
Reference
In
it.
the last, 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph, it says anti-racist policies, programs, and practices. And was contemplated that under practices, the idea of practices, internal controls are within that term. Thank you, I'm complete.
Thank you.
And
You have
I'm
any
wondering-
thoughts?
I'm wondering if that's work, because I know when we're doing work with the visions, we craft the vision statement and then we have to go back and have a deep dive and really identify what those words mean to all of us. So I'm wondering if that's work that we need to do with Dr. Rogers Ard. But we have different terminology in there, so now we have to go back and say what this means to all of us.
Yes.
And then get consensus on that.
So you're saying that what needs to happen is a working definition that everyone is in agreement with, or everyone acknowledges, so then that accountability can be held to that definition.
Yeah.
So for example, if we say practices includes teacher strategies used in the classroom, then that has to be made clear, because then that becomes the accountability measure that we use when we walk into a classroom. Are you using teaching strategies that have been
Correct.
Mhm.
deemed as anti-racist teaching
Correct.
strategies? Okay, and
Right.
if not, the accountability measure is, our statement says
Yeah.
that we are supporting anti-racist policies, programs, and practices. And this is your teaching strategy is a practice.
Right.
So I need you to lean this way instead of
ma'am.
that way.
And to provide another example, as we think about the strategic plan and I bring it to the board and you approve it, that's the first part of the work.
Mhm.
The rest of the work and the biggest part of the work is now we have to sit down with every member and look at the vision, mission, and core values separately and then build consensus. So we've identified this as a core value. What does this mean to all of us so that anyone that comes into our organization, they understand what this means or this word in the vision or
Yeah.
mission statement means. So it's a building consensus process. So I
Okay.
see that as the work for Dr. Rogers all in the board.
I agree. I agree. Okay. Well, thank you for that comment. I agree. I think that we need to develop a bigger understanding. So would you like to discuss the AR? Because we haven't looked at that before. And it doesn't necessarily need to go to the full board because ARs don't go to the board. But I appreciate that you're bringing it here for feedback. So would you like to kind
Yes,
of walk
sir.
us through it?
So this is completely new and let me bring it up. On the screen.
And Dr. Hughes, you're gonna speak to how this was developed?
Yes.
Okay.
So I will share with you that when I talked to legal counsel, he did an exhaustive search and he literally shared with me that there is not a lot of people that's doing this work, especially to the level of an AR. So it was really difficult for him to find an AR, but he did find I think two districts. And he compiled them and he's just presenting this to us as an example. Now, I will say that I forwarded this AR to Dr. Rogers Ard and she did have feedback and I could pull up that email from her and share with you specifically what her feedback was.
May
Yes.
I maybe make a recommendation? So I think that when it comes to the R, which is the implementation of our policy and
Yes.
statement, which is really under the umbrella of staff.
Yes.
I mean, I tend to say that I'm an expert on many things, but I also feel like this is really your area of expertise with your staff.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we could send it
We can send it to
you
us,
guys
yes.
and for you guys to also discuss with the anti-racist team
yes.
and other groups, because I think that there should be a lot of eyes on something like this,
Yes.
right? That really looks at it from different views. So
I agree.
I wonder if it could go to your staff, and then after it goes to your staff and the anti-racist group, I think after that point, if it can come back to us, I think that would be good. But I feel like, because this is such an initial stage, I don't necessarily want us to change it because of our personal feedback before hearing what staff has to say
Yeah.
about the implementation. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, because I see there's an HR piece in number 3,
Right?
right? I see there's a curriculum, a CAO piece, and
Yeah.
another one. I see that there may be a facilities piece or another piece in there, so I would like your staff to do work with this, but I would like to keep the versions, right? So we can look at
Yeah.
it, like, this is an initial version. Then what does it look like with Dr. Rogers Ard feedback, because she's an expert in that? And then what does it look like with your staff saying, this is great, but this is not doable. And the honest conversation, this is not doable
Mhm.
yet, growth mindset.
Yeah.
Because we have to have these other things in place before that. And then it should go to the anti-racist subcommittee, because that
Mhm.
subcommittee has experts in it as well.
Yeah.
And those experts have a working understanding of what
Mhm.
happens in the district. So, and then I would like it to come back to us in
Okay.
the most polished version,
Mhm.
and then we can move that forward. Now, I also would like to say, I want that to happen expeditiously,
Mhm.
because I would like this to be in place prior to the start of the
So,
new year
Yeah.
and prior to us hiring people,
Mhm.
because I want them to understand, this is what you coming into. So be clear that you understand, this is the district that we are.
Yeah.
So I'm complete.
So I do like all of that. Dr. Rogers, I'm looking at her comments now. She did give specific feedback.
Uh-huh.
But I do agree, I think maybe there needs to be a conversation with the executive team.
Mhm.
Because usually that's where all discussions happen with ARs.
Yeah.
At our executive cabinet.
I agree.
I think we invite Rogers Ard to that meeting, and then she helps us to
Yes.
fine tune it.
Two birds, one stone.
Yes, exactly.
That's a great idea.
Mhm.
I also think that we also gotta remember exactly what ARs are meant to be.
Yes.
And I think that sending it to like a wider group, like the other, I mean, obviously, I think that's not a group that creates ARs,
Right.
right? So I also don't want them to think that like an AR is a place to like ask for like how we're gonna fire someone, things like that, because that's not really what it's intended to be. I think that's why it has to be your staff,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
they have the expertise behind creating this type of thing. Which is really more important even than I think our statement's critical, but I think that this is exactly how it's going to be
Because
developed,
this
right?
is the level of accountability.
Right.
So what's in here
Mm-hmm.
is taking our statement and adding that level of accountability, adding that level of, you broke administrative regulation number 3,
Yes.
and we're talking about, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So with the group that I just left, the meeting prior to
Yeah.
this meeting, it was with the anti-racist subcommittee, and they are creating 18 questions.
Yeah.
To have when you go into a school to measure
Mm,
if that school, where that school is on their anti-racist journey, because
Rubric.
anti-racism is a journey.
mhm,
So are you here? Are you here? Are you all the way down here? And based on where you are, we set a goal of where you have to be with the support and the resources. But those 18 questions that they're formulating is, a rubric of sorts,
Yes.
right?
Mm.
So, but it's going through the process of, everybody look at this. What do we see? What do we need to have? What do we need to make sure is there? That's not punitive,
Mhm,
because that's not our role.
Yeah.
But is informative,
mhm,
because then we can give it to you, which is your role,
Absolutely.
to ensure that the schools are all on this journey.
Yeah.
And support the ones that are down here,
Mhm,
encourage the ones that are up here,
Mhm.
get the ones in the middle moving.
Yeah.
You gotta move. So I agree with all your points.
And can I just mention timeline? And I really like the idea of doing it with the executive team, because that's where it's done. We can bring Rogers Ard in the meeting. We have a retreat set up, but that retreat is right after graduation.
Mhm.
Is that an acceptable timeframe?
It is for me, because I think we have 22 days left, 23 days, 22 or 23 days left. And I want it done expeditiously, but I don't want it rushed.
Okay.
So there has to be some thoughtfulness behind it. And if people are thinking about how to keep a graduation safe, or where they're having a conversation with this, then this is not focused on. But at a retreat, we have now closed the books on 180 days.
Right.
We're getting ready to open the books on another 180
Mhm.
days, but we got a sweet spot in there
Mhm.
to where we can create substantive changes.
Yeah.
That's where I would like this to fall in. is
And
that
if we,
sweet spot.
if we could do it before, then we will do it. We'll try to invite her in. And I only said that for June, because I know that we are hiring principals now, and you mentioned that you want to have this in place
Yeah,
before.
yeah, I do. I actually do, but I don't want it to be rushed.
Okay,
But I want us to understand that our principals are at-will employees.
Yeah.
Mm.
So because you're an at-will employee, if you get up in here and you start wilding out
mhm,
and you're unable to meet this, very quickly, then, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. And we have to be very strong enough to do that. I'm complete.
Thank you. I got all of that.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Okay, well, then that will come back to us.
Yes.
Let's move to our last item for tonight, which is a new board policy we're trying to create. Well, we have a board policy on student trustees, but a new addition to that policy, I guess, where the idea came from San Diego, which kind of was in the news about them providing compensation and credit to student trustees for participating as being part of the board meetings and being trustees themselves. Dr. Hurst attached on the agenda our current student board member policy from West Contra Costa, and then the two examples that exist in California from San Diego, the one that was just passed that I mentioned a few months back, and then one from Soledad, which was passed just recently. Must have actually happened right after the San Diego one. Thank you. Okay, so for discussion, that's really our goal is one, not just to increase engagement with our students, but they're full participants. I do think that one, for sure, we should be providing them credit. But then two, I do think we should be providing them compensation. I do think that in San Diego and Soledad, they're matching the trustees' pay. I do think that for us, well, it's not gonna break the bank, even though we're in bad financial situation, but I do think that it should be to start, I think it should be a little bit less. Because student trustees don't do the full work that regular trustees do. Yet I do want them to get compensated for attending board meetings. So for today, I think that I would like for us to review our current policy and then review the two examples, which should be pretty short. But then why don't we take on public comment first to see if there's any? Since we have two wonderful folks here present, do either of you have public comment that you would like to make on this item? Okay, why don't we start? Yes.
I think this is an excellent idea to have the students be recognized for the fact that they're putting their time and initiative to a very, very important issue. I do think that they should be compensated. Leave that up to you guys how, but I think that this would so much strengthen their leadership ability and their resumes and CVs as they go on to college and go to life. So I'm totally think this is an excellent idea. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so hello, everyone. I completely agree here about giving folks credit and also compensating them. I think it's also about equity. And I think it's also a way to potentially get more students involved. If you say, hey, you can get some money and get paid to be involved in this sort of student body work, I think that's a great way to try to get more folks involved, especially students from WCCUSD, which the majority are Black and Brown students. And so I think this would be a great way for them to get civically involved in their education in a way that, at least being a WCCUSD student myself, I didn't get to experience that sort of top level understanding. And so I completely agree. And I think they should be given credits as well as compensation. And again, the money is up to you all, but I absolutely agree. And I think it'd be a great way for them to be more involved and get more students involved as well. I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, before I pass it on to you both for your thoughts, I was thinking of a couple things. One, I agree with everything our speaker said. I do think it's gonna increase engagement. I think it's gonna also maybe open the doors for students that have to work because they either support families or just support themselves. So some might choose like, you know what, I prefer to work than obviously sit on the board because I have to make that choice, right? So that maybe I will allow them to have another part-time job instead of full-time job or something like that, right? So maybe I'll open the door in that direction. And so credit for sure, for me, yes. Compensation, I think that we need to discuss a little bit more on what that would look like. Both the San Diego policy and the Soledad policy, discuss specifically how they are elected. And it's a little bit different than ours. So I do think that we have to have a discussion around that. Because I also think that if we're gonna open the door for compensation and credit, and we do get increased engagement, right? How is the selection process going to be? I do think that has to be a little bit better, right? Because I don't want it to be favoritism. I don't want it to be whoever we know or like, right? Which, also favoritism in a different way. Or a principle, right? So I want to make sure that like, we also have a small discussion around that. The San Diego policy specifically says that only schools with over 60% of free and reduced lunch are eligible to have a student trustee, which I think it's actually a little bit interesting. I don't know if I would say let's move in that direction yet, but it does bring also a piece about advocacy for some of our schools that need that advocacy the most sometimes. Right, so I do think that's very curious. So anyways, but historically, we've also had student trustees for middle college, which would not allow for that to happen. So I'm also worried about that piece. But it's very intriguing. So I'll pass it on to you both for thoughts, and then maybe we can look at specific language after that.
So credit, yes. I don't have a problem with credit. I think that needs to be looked through that can be an easy lift. Because we did just as easy of a lift when we said, hey, marching band is a PE credit. We did that. We changed it, we opened up, we removed barriers. I think that serving as a student trustee is removing a barrier. You are doing a civic duty. You are doing an elective because it falls outside of your time at school. So I'm okay with the credit. However, that has to be framed inside our A to G. I'm okay with that. Side note, we need to open up sports to have a credit for PE. You should not have to do sports and PE at the same time. It's literally the same thing. Side note. When we talk about compensation, I want to look at what does it mean when you are compensated for a job, you have a job description that you must hit to get your payment. If we are going to open this up and have this a teachable moment that you now have a job, then we also need to train, evaluate, and ensure that we're doing all the policies for equitable hiring. So it may not be a vote, it may be an interview now, because you're interviewing for a job. If it's the way that we're having board members elected, then that election process looks a little different. How is that election process going to happen with student trustees who are all over the district? We had at-large elections before. We know that that had a tinge of bias because you only got members of the board elected from one area. I would like to see data on the last 5 years, the student trustees and what schools they came from. I would like to highly interrogate the way we have all student Congress. How are you at all student Congress? Are all of our high schools represented at all student Congress? Do we have students from Greenwood in all student Congress? Because if we can't get that right, then we're unable to hire equitably because everybody's not at the table. And so these are the things that I want to talk about before we talk about compensation. I want to interrogate what we already have and how we need to change that policy to be ready to compensate whoever's at the board level. And then who becomes their manager? Who becomes the person that says, can't be on your computer? You have to make sure you attend. Attendance matters. We are expecting your job description says that you have to go visit schools, or you have to have some way of bringing feedback from the All Student Congress. Who takes that on? Because if we don't have an accountability measure, we're just creating more ways to have a lot of bias and to have a lot of box checking and to have a lot of and now we're paying for it. So I don't want to pay for mediocre. If we're paying for it, I don't like that we pay some of the board members. But the fact that we do, it is what it is. But there's going to have to be a standard, a raised standard, because that's what I'm looking for. Because you are no longer a student, you are an employee. What does that look like? What rights do they have now as an employee? And we say that this can be for all high school students are able to be student trustees, but you cannot work until you are 15. right, with a waiver? So what if I'm a freshman and I'm 14? I'm in all student Congress, but now I can't work and be a member of the board. I have to wait till I'm 15, or I have to have a waiver of employment. There's questions that are come to this. This, I think we have to go slow to go fast. But I think we can agree of the intention. We intend to have a practice or policy in place by 2025 fall, where we are compensating board trustees. And we need to be able to have CBO Moses in the room when we have this compensation question too. Because when my kid works, what's your insurance?
Mhm.
Are we paying them to a level to where now they have to fill out or pay taxes or whatever it comes to? I don't know all of that.
Yeah.
So we need to have CBO Moses in here when we, in my opinion, when we discuss compensation and what compensation looks like. I'm complete.
I agree with what they said and what both of you said as well. I would just add that I think there needs to be legal counsel
Yes.
in the room.
Yes.
Just to kind of guide us, because this is new legislation that has come down from the state. And if it's Harold, or you may not like this name, I'm gonna throw out Kevin Gordon, because he sits in the room and he knows like the intent of the legislators as well. Maybe having someone like that, or legal counsel, I'm sure Harold would know. But I think we need to gather up all of our questions and run them by legal counsel. And I agree with you. I was thinking this as well, that there needs to be very clear expectations for the student trustees. As I think about hours in their tenure, they really have not had any presentations. So the question would become, what will we pay them for now? It would be interesting to see where San Diego is, because they were one of the front runners to get something out. So have they kind of vetted this and asked the questions? And maybe something I could reach out to the superintendent, because I do know him, and I can find out their process without going to Harold first, and to see if they've entertained some of this, to see if they have a job description or clear expectations in place for student trustees as well. And I do know that they do theirs a little bit different. Their student trustees usually report out on something every time they're there. And ours really, they do 1 or 2 presentations. So that's something I could do if you two would like me to do, without going to legal counsel, to see how they have vetted everything and see if they have a job description or clear expectations.
I like free. So if you have a
Yeah.
friend who can give you that
Yeah,
information.
I know the superintendent.
So if you have that contact, I think that
Mm-hmm.
would be well. Also want to bring up the fact that we need to interrogate our all-student Congress. Do we have students that have special needs or special ed in that all-student Congress? That is supposed to represent all students.
Right.
So do we have students in the all-student Congress that have IEPs, 504s, maybe mild to moderate? We need to look at that, because when we come to hiring, because now you're hiring. So your hiring pool needs to be equitable. It needs to have access to all students. Because again, I don't want us to get litigated against, because we're opening it up to something. Side note, I would love for their vote to actually count. I know that can't happen, but
Yeah.
side note, I would love that. If the legislation ever changed, because now you're paying them. But if the legislation ever changed, or if we have an ear to the people in the state, don't have a student trustee if they vote don't count. That's just, it's advisory, but we need to have, if they are the voice of the students, then that's their constituents.
Yeah.
Then that's who they have to be held accountable to, and they need to bring back something that's actually tangible back to us. I appreciate their advisory vote, but I know it's advisory. I would love that to happen, but I mean, they get their check first, but that's where I'm complete.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody made really good points. I think you asked a lot of questions that I hadn't even thought about. But I mean, I think that there's like a couple ways of thinking about compensation alone.
Yeah.
I think that there could be like a base pay plus for every board meeting you attend, you get an additional X, right? It's like an incentive for being a trustee, because I know they do a few things outside of the board
Yeah.
meetings, so it could be the base, and for you know, at the attendance, you get the additional amount that will equate to a total of X or Y, right? I do think that we can put certain regulations, like you have to be a junior or a senior, right? I do think that Student Congress has some of these rules for the election of the student trustees, so we will have to find out as well.
Okay.
I mean, the San Diego example, they actually have a district-wide election of in all the high schools, where they provide, I don't know how they do it, but I'm assuming that they provide either time in the classroom or an assembly where they watch the candidate videos of people running for school
Mhm.
board.
Yeah.
And then their term is a year though, which makes sense, right? Because like, why would you go through all of that for every semester? So, I thought that was really interesting. I mean, it kind of like gives them an example of civic engagement, you know, voting in elections, right? Because we want them to be engaged in that one day too. So it actually would be kind of cool to see that in our own schools, right? So, and I have no idea how they probably manage it because they have
Right.
even more schools than we do. So it'd be really interesting to hear how they manage it. So I would be really interested to see if you could have a conversation with the superintendent of San Diego. I think that after you talk to him and from hearing our thoughts, I would appreciate if you could bring us a draft of what you think would be good based on our current bylaw. So actually, if you could go back, if you could go, if Eric could go to bylaw 9150, which is on the agenda. Our current language says, a student board member shall be entitled to be reimbursed for mileage to the same extent as other board members on the board, but shall not receive compensation for attendance of board meetings. So specifically calls that out. It does talk a little bit about certain criteria around responsibilities, you know, the monthly meetings with youth commission. This is a very outdated policy because we
Yeah.
don't even have the youth commission anymore. Learning opportunities. So I would actually, I think this is a little bit wider to your point. I think that I would actually love for us to redo this policy because both San Diego and Soledad have like some really cool sections around like they have to attend Brown Act training. They have to attend training on what it looks like to be a trustee. I mean, our current two trustees went like 3 months without knowing they could even make a motion,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So then like, what does the orientation look like, right? Can they just participate in a CSBA training? So I would like for us to develop it a little bit further. So I guess the request, and see if you agree, is that if you could look at all three policies and see if you could bring us recommendations on how you would change our policy according to what the positive parts that you see from both the San Diego and Soledad after talking to the superintendent of San Diego. And then maybe if you could run it by, who's in charge of Student Congress, Tashaka?
Shaka.
If you could speak to him and see if he could also participate.
Okay.
I would like for him to come to our next meeting. I would like for Ms. Moses to come to the next meeting. Trying to think if there's anyone else.
Do we need someone here if we're gonna do
Miss-
credit?
If Ms. Sigler and Mr. De Leon could
Oh,
come,
yeah.
and credit.
If we do credit, if we give them A to G credit, do we need someone here to speak to
That would be Sigel and DeLeon.
that would
Oh,
be,
perfect.
that could be able to speak
Yeah.
to how credit would be given to students,
Yeah.
all, or
Okay.
students who are board members?
And I think that would be a good reason for them to be here. I was also thinking if we are making recommendations of change of how we're gonna elect students, then I think that their perspective will be critical too, because we don't wanna put something forward that we just cannot accomplish.
Right.
Right? So they'll know better from talking to high school principals, whether or not, you know, whatever we wanna bring forward.
And if you give credit, who is going to fill out the report card? Is that you? Who's the teacher on paper? Because credit just can't be given. It has,
I think
maybe it
I
can.
think it's like almost like an internship type of thing,
So
you
that's how
can
they
get
give
credit.
credit?
but we have to look into it. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
I know you spelled the questions out pretty good. I have it recorded. I can go back and listen to it.
You know, I'm a fast talker. I talk fast. But I would like to know that when we look at this policy, what's the behavior line? As a student trustee, you will behave in the manner of whatever it is, because that,
Mhm.
just like we talked about the governing handbook,
Mhm.
there needs to be a line in here, maybe that's around your job description, but there's a line about conduct, behavior, how you conduct yourself as a board member, right? Or a level of ethics. If you get caught, you're a board member, let's say.
Mhm.
I'm a board member and I get expelled from school. Can I still be a board member?
Hmm.
I'm a board member and I get suspended for doing a walkout. Can I still be a board member? I'm activating my civic right
Mhm.
here. I'm
Mhm.
doing what's the best for my, whoever I'm representing. So if I participate in a walkout, am I still a board member? If I participate in civil dissidence, am I still a board member?
I think if we just make it clear that they also fall under the governance handbook.
That's what I was gonna say.
Then
I think
that
it covers
needs to
all,
be
I think
properly
it covers all
included.
those things, yeah.
So it would be curious to know, how do we insert, make sure this is inside the governance handbook, with they saying that you fall as a employee of the district, because that's what you become.
Mhm.
Because that, we're employees of the district and elected officials, right?
Mhm.
Because we get our check, it says WCUC. You fall under the guidelines that are represented in the governance handbook
Mhm.
for board trustees.
Mm.
And this is what it looks like. I think that once we start compensating board members, student trustees, we have to be very tight with the training.
Mhm.
This is what it's like to be on the board. And sometimes you stay to 2 o'clock in the morning,
Mhm.
and that's part of being compensated. You have to know that that's part of your compensation. You will be tired the next day,
Mhm.
just like everybody else that sits here and takes this check,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
You have to do the homework before. You have to be able to submit those questions beforehand to the
Mhm.
board. You get 3 questions in 2 minutes, and there's an
Mhm.
expectation that you go to one-on-ones. So
Mhm.
now they're in one-on-ones,
Mhm.
because you are a paid member of the board, and we want to make sure that you do all the criteria that other board members, to the best of your ability,
Right.
can do. So, and then see if I don't want to create barriers, right? What if I have a student trustee who I really want to be on the board, but I take the bus to and from school, I don't have transportation to get to a board meeting. You're creating a barrier for me. Do we give bus passes? Do we say with it, we do
Pay for
mileage?
mileage.
Does that mean that we then pay for an Uber though? What do we do to make sure that transportation is not a problem?
Mm.
Just a question. I'm just throwing it out there, not trying to make it harder than it is. I just wanna.
I mean, I think that you're asking really good questions, and I think that, we just have to be careful, because as I was listening to you, I was like, well, yeah, we gotta pay him full time. Because
I
you're
know,
asking
as
for
soon as you were
everything that we
saying that, I
do,
was like,
right? So,
Okay, yes.
I mean, I think that it has to be part of the discussion, right? Like, why would we ask him to do versus why are we not asking
And
him
then
to do?
are we paying for what we're asking for?
Right.
Right? So if we're giving them a measured compensation, then I'm not gonna ask them to do.
Right.
But if like San Diego or that other place and they match the board members' pay, oh, friend, me and you both sitting up here sleepy, midterm or not, we both sitting up here at 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock, and you're making the same check I'm making.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things that I think that that's part of the conversation.
Well, to be fair though, well, San Diego is much more extensive, but
It is.
Soledad is really short.
Yeah.
So actually Soledad only pays them, doesn't even give them credit. San Diego is the only place that gives student trustees credit, which is interesting. But the San Diego, it goes way more in specifics. And you were right, it is elective course credit that San Diego gives. You were
Mhm.
totally right. And it says it says an elective course credit based on the number of equivalent daily instructional minutes for the student member service provided. I have
Mhm.
no idea how you'd even calculate that. They would have to probably keep credit of the activities that they do, which could help with accountability.
Yeah.
Right, so,
It could. I mean, because we
Well,
only meet twice a month.
Yeah.
And they are not required to come to, or invited to the retreats. Or they're not required to come to the special meetings, or we don't see them at a lot of our special meetings,
closed
so,
sessions.
or our closed session.
but if they have to attend one-on-ones, if they have to attend student congress, if they have to attend meetings with the superintendent, right, like
Yeah.
all of that should be
Add it
counted,
up, yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Because they're doing that work, so.
Yeah, I, just thinking about it, I will touch base with the superintendent, but I know, a district that big, he probably has no idea who wrote the policy
Right,
of that,
right.
so I'll find out who wrote the policy and who's responsible for implementation, and that's the
Great.
person that I'll talk to.
Great.
Yeah.
Maybe we could even invite them to come talk to us for a few minutes,
Yeah.
to our next meeting, so we can talk to us
Maybe
about
they
that.
could pay us to go down there.
I'm
Visit San
sorry.
Diego for me. But they're paying us.
You're funny. Okay, wonderful. Well, this is a really great discussion, much deeper than I actually thought it was going to go. So we have kind of like our work, well, really, it's all on you. So you're gonna discuss this with folks in San Diego.
Yes.
You'll discuss it with different parties that we talked about earlier, and then you'll bring us a draft
And
for our next
and
meeting.
if I can invite the person who actually is responsible for writing and implementing the policy, I'll invite them to the meeting as well.
And tell them to check out the video so they know the questions that we're gonna ask,
Gotcha.
or at least have answers to.
Okay. I'll probably have Genesis like document all the questions and send it to them.
That'd be great.
instead
The
of-
transcript.
Yeah.
That's what she gets for leaving early.
Thank
I'm just kidding. When she listens to this, I am kidding, Genesis. Okay, wonderful. Well, that was our last item. So we did great. I think that,
Mhm.
going forward, we should probably put 4 items.
Yeah.
'Cause I think we're getting to know
Yeah.
how fast we move.
Mhm.
So for our next steps, we did not include our number of policies that we have. But like I mentioned, when we started, we have about 16, 17 in the docket right now, so we're getting through them as quickly as we can. At the next meeting, we're gonna have 4 to review, potentially some for action, some for discussion, depending on what legal counsel says. And we don't have a date set yet, but we're gonna be meeting in June. So I will adjourn us at 6:19 PM. Thank you, everybody who came in person and who watched online.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yeah. And Zoom.